There are moments when everything outside looks the same, but inside, something is shifting. You feel it, the tension, the restlessness, the quiet weight on your chest. It's uncomfortable, confusing, but it's not chaos. It's the space right before your life changes. If you're feeling this pressure, you are not the only one. Watch closely, because what you're about to see may change how you understand everything that's happening to you. You feel it before you understand it. That quiet pressure in your chest that doesn't come from fear, but from something tightening inside you. Life hasn't fallen apart, yet it doesn't feel stable either. You wake up tired in a way sleep doesn't fix. You move through your days with a strange heaviness, like you're carrying something invisible that no one else can see. And the worst part is, you can't explain it. So you start assuming something is wrong with you. You think you're losing motivation. You think you're failing. You think you should be stronger than this. But listen closely. This pressure didn't arrive to break you. It arrived because something inside you is shifting, and your old way of living can't hold it anymore. Before any real change, there's always resistance. Not from the world, but from within. Your mind tries to keep everything familiar. Your habits try to stay in control. Your identity tries to protect itself. And when growth starts pushing against those walls, it doesn't feel exciting. It feels uncomfortable. It feels heavy. It feels like pressure. You're not collapsing. You're being compressed. This is a phase people misread the most. They try to escape it. They distract themselves. They numb it. They force positivity over it. But that only makes it worse, because this pressure isn't asking to be ignored. It's asking to be understood. Something old in you is loosening its grip. The version of you that survived by staying small, staying quiet, staying predictable, it's starting to crack. And that version doesn't leave peacefully. It tightens first. It resists. It creates doubt. It makes you question yourself. That's why this stage feels so confusing. You're still standing in the same life, but internally, you're no longer the same person who built it. The pressure comes from that mismatch, from outgrowing a structure you're still living inside. If this were failure, things would feel empty, but they don't. They feel intense, charged, heavy with meaning. Even your exhaustion has weight to it. Even your doubt feels purposeful. That's because this pressure isn't draining you, it's concentrating you. Think about it. Nothing transforms without first being pressed. Nothing strengthens without resistance. Nothing changes shape without force acting on it. And right now, life is pressing on you, not to crush you, but to prepare you. The mistake is thinking you need to fix this feeling. You don't. You need to stay present with it. Let it reveal what no longer fits. Let it show you which expectations, beliefs, and roles are too tight for who you're becoming. This is a moment where patience matters more than answers, where awareness matters more than action, where you stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "What is trying to change?" Because once you understand that this pressure is not punishment, everything shifts. You stop fighting yourself. You stop panicking. You stop labeling this phase as weakness. And in that moment, the pressure begins to make sense. You realize this isn't the end of something. It's the tension before the beginning, the silence before movement, the wait before release. And when you finally see it for what it is, you don't feel afraid anymore. You feel ready. You keep asking yourself the same question late at night. Why does it feel like nothing is changing? You're showing up. You're trying. You're thinking differently, moving differently, choosing better than before. And yet, when you look at your life, it feels unchanged. Same surroundings, same struggles, same silence. That's the part that hurts the most. Not the effort, but the lack of proof that it's working. So doubt starts creeping in. Quietly at first, then louder. You wonder if you're wasting time, if you misunderstood growth, if everyone else is moving forward while you're standing still, pretending to evolve. And because nothing visible is happening, you start turning against yourself. You blame your discipline, your mindset, your ability to follow through. But here's what you don't see yet. Real progress is almost never loud in the beginning. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't rush to impress you. It works underground, when no one claps and no one notices, including you. You were taught to measure growth by outcomes, results, external change. But the most important shifts don't show up on the surface first. They show up in how you pause before reacting, in how certain patterns don't grip you as tightly anymore, in how you're no longer as comfortable with the life that once felt normal. Those are not small things. Those are structural changes. Think about what you're actually doing right now. You're unlearning. You're dismantling habits that took years to build. You're questioning beliefs that once defined you. That kind of work doesn't produce immediate rewards. It produces stability. It creates space. It lays foundations that can actually support what's coming next. The frustration you feel isn't because nothing is happening. It's because something important is happening without validation. And your mind hates that. It wants evidence. It wants reassurance. It wants results it can point to and say, "See, this was worth it." But growth doesn't ask for your approval before it works. This phase feels invisible because it's internal. You're becoming someone new before your life reflects it. And that gap, the space between internal change and external proof, is where most people quit. Not because they are weak, but because they misinterpret silence as failure. You're not stagnant. You're stabilizing. You're not behind. You're preparing. And preparation is quiet by nature. No applause. No milestones. Just pressure, patience, and trust. The mistake is thinking you need to push harder to make progress visible. Sometimes pushing is exactly what delays it. Because this stage isn't about forcing outcomes. It's about becoming capable of sustaining them. If results showed up now, they would collapse under the weight of who you used to be. That's why it feels slow. That's why it feels unseen. Because life is upgrading your internal structure before it hands you anything new. And one day, not because you rushed, but because you stayed, you'll look back and realize this was the most important phase. The phase where you learned to keep going without applause. Where you learned to trust growth you couldn't measure. Where you learned that progress doesn't need witnesses to be real. When the results finally arrive, they won't feel sudden. They'll feel owned, and you'll understand something clearly for the first time. What felt like nothing happening was actually everything aligning. You wake up tired in a way sleep doesn't fix. Not the kind of tired that comes from doing too much, but the kind that sits deeper, behind your thoughts, inside your chest. You haven't run a marathon. You haven't collapsed under responsibility. Yet everything feels heavy. Even simple decisions drain you. Even explaining yourself feels exhausting. And the worst part is this quiet fear that maybe something is wrong with you. So you start questioning yourself. Why are you so drained when others seem fine? Why does motivation come and go? Why do you feel distant from the version of yourself that used to push harder, tolerate more, survive without asking questions? That's where self-doubt sneaks in. It tells you you're getting weaker, softer, less capable than you were before. But what if that exhaustion isn't weakness at all? What if you're tired because you're carrying an identity that no longer fits? Outgrowing yourself is not clean. It doesn't feel empowering in the moment. It feels confusing. You're no longer energized by the things that once drove you, but you haven't fully stepped into what's next either. So you exist in between, still performing parts of an old life while slowly realizing it's costing you more than it gives. That internal conflict is exhausting. Pretending something still matters when it doesn't. Forcing yourself to respond the way you used to. Holding standards, relationships, expectations that your nervous system has already outgrown. You're not tired because you're lazy. You're tired because you're misaligned. And instead of recognizing that, you blame yourself. You tell yourself to try harder, to be grateful, to push through. But pushing through is exactly what's draining you. Because every push is you asking an outdated version of yourself to keep running a race it was never meant to finish. Here's the truth most people never hear. Emotional fatigue often shows up right before an identity shift. When the old self starts loosening its grip, there's a period of instability. Your mind doesn't know who it's supposed to be yet. Your habits don't match your awareness anymore. And that mismatch creates friction inside you. You feel slower because you're recalibrating. You feel uncertain because your internal compass is changing. You feel drained because parts of you are finally asking to be released instead of recycled. This is not the moment to attack yourself. This is the moment to listen. Notice what drains you now. Not what should drain you, what actually does. Notice what you tolerate out of habit, not desire. Notice how your body reacts before your mind catches up. That exhaustion is information. It's telling you where you've been overextending your old self into a life that's asking for something different. You don't need to shame yourself for feeling lost. You're not losing yourself. You're shedding something that once kept you safe but now keeps you small. And shedding is tiring work. It's emotional labor no one sees. There's no celebration for it. Just quiet exhaustion and unanswered questions. But something important is happening underneath that fatigue. You're learning what no longer belongs to you. You're learning what costs too much. You're learning that growth isn't always expansion. Sometimes it's subtraction. And yes, that process will leave you tired before it leaves you free. So stop calling this burnout. Stop calling it failure. Stop calling it weakness. This is transition. And transitions demand rest, not punishment. Awareness, not judgment. Space, not pressure. The exhaustion you feel is not the end of your strength. It's a sign that you're done pretending to be someone you're no longer becoming. When you stop fighting that truth, something shifts. The fatigue doesn't vanish overnight, but it softens. Because for the first time, you're not using your energy to hold on to a version of yourself that's already letting go. And in that release, slowly, quietly, your real strength begins to return. The moment comes quietly. Something that used to calm you doesn't work anymore. The distraction fails. The routine feels empty. The same thoughts you once used to survive now leave you restless instead of relieved. You try to go back to what used to help, but it feels like wearing clothes that no longer fit. Too tight, too wrong. And that's when fear creeps in, because the tools that kept you afloat are suddenly useless. So you panic a little. You ask yourself why you can't cope the way you used to. Why your old strength feels unreliable. Why the habits that once kept you functional now leave you more unsettled than before. You start thinking something is breaking inside you, but nothing is breaking. Something is ending. Old coping patterns don't stop working randomly. They stop working when you no longer need to survive the way you once did. They were built for a version of you that lived under different pressure, different limits, different awareness. And now that you've outgrown that version, those patterns can't carry you forward. The problem is, losing them feels like losing control. Those habits, overworking, shutting down, pleasing everyone, staying busy, staying numb, they gave you certainty. They gave you something to reach for when life felt overwhelming. And when they disappear, you're left exposed. No shield, no familiar escape, just silence and discomfort. That's the part most people try to avoid. They rush to replace the old pattern with a new one. Another distraction, another identity, another way to avoid sitting with the unknown. But that urgency to fill the gap is exactly what delays growth. Because this phase isn't asking you to cope better. It's asking you to stay present without coping at all. This is refinement. Life is removing strategies that no longer align with who you're becoming. And refinement is uncomfortable because it strips you down. It forces you to face emotions without muting them, questions without quick answers, stillness without reassurance. You feel anxious because you're no longer hiding from yourself. You feel unsettled because you're not numbing what needs to be felt. You feel exposed because there's nothing between you and the truth anymore. And that's terrifying until you realize something important. You're not meant to go back. You're meant to go through. This stage asks for patience, not performance. It asks you to sit with uncertainty instead of running from it, to let confusion exist without immediately fixing it, to trust that not knowing is part of becoming someone who knows more deeply. Your old patterns were survival mechanisms. They kept you going when you didn't have space to process, reflect, or slow down. But survival is not the same as alignment. And when alignment becomes possible, survival tactics start feeling heavy. So stop asking why you can't cope like before. Ask what you're being invited to face now. Notice what comes up when you don't escape. Notice what surfaces when you don't distract. Notice the thoughts, the emotions, the discomfort you once avoided. That's not weakness, that's awareness expanding. Yes, this phase feels unstable. Yes, it feels like standing on ground that hasn't hardened yet. But instability doesn't mean danger. It means construction is happening. You are learning to respond instead of react, to feel without collapsing, to exist without needing constant relief. And that skill, though uncomfortable, is far stronger than any coping mechanism you've ever had. Eventually, new ways of being will emerge. Not forced, not rushed. They'll be quieter, more grounded, more honest. But they won't arrive until you stop trying to replace what's falling away. Let the old patterns go without panic. Let the discomfort teach you. Let the uncertainty stretch you. Because this moment, when nothing familiar works anymore, is not a loss of safety. It's the moment you stop surviving and begin learning how to live without hiding from yourself. You feel it every day, even if you don't have words for it. A strange tension inside you. Part of you wants to go back to what was familiar, predictable, safe. And another part of you can't unsee what you've seen, can't unknow what you now know. You're standing between two lives, and neither one fully feels like home anymore. That space is exhausting. You try to move forward, but something keeps pulling you backward. Old habits call your name. Old versions of you feel easier to wear. At the same time, staying there feels dishonest, like shrinking yourself just to avoid discomfort. So you're stuck, too aware to go back, too uncertain to fully step ahead. This is where many people start panicking. They label this phase confusion, failure, or instability. They tell themselves they're lost. But what you're actually experiencing is transition. And transition is uncomfortable because it asks you to live without a clear identity for a while. You were someone for a long time. You knew how to behave, how to react, how to survive. That version of you had rules, patterns, a rhythm. And even if it wasn't healthy, it was known, predictable. Letting go of that feels like stepping off solid ground. At the same time, the person you're becoming hasn't fully arrived yet. There's no instruction manual, no guarantee, just a pull you feel in your chest that says, this matters, even if it scares you. That in-between state creates pressure. It makes you feel restless, emotional, impatient with yourself. You want clarity, but clarity doesn't come before acceptance. Here's the truth you need to hear. You don't need to choose sides right now. You don't need to force yourself to be who you're becoming. And you don't need to shame yourself for who you were. Growth doesn't require violence against your past. It requires understanding. Resistance is what's hurting you. Every time you fight this phase, you create more tension. Every time you judge yourself for not being there yet, you slow the process down. Acceptance isn't giving up. It's allowing both versions of you to exist without war. You can honor who you were without living there. You can feel drawn toward who you're becoming without rushing to perform it. This space, this uncomfortable middle, is not wasted time. It's integration. It's where lessons settle into your nervous system. It's where you learn what to carry forward and what to leave behind. It's where you stop defining yourself by extremes and start becoming more honest. Notice how your reactions are changing, even if your life hasn't yet. Notice how certain things don't satisfy you the way they used to. Notice how your tolerance for misalignment is shrinking. That's not confusion. That's growth sharpening your awareness. You don't feel settled because you're not meant to settle for what no longer fits. The mistake is thinking you need to arrive somewhere quickly to be okay. You don't. You need permission to be unfinished, to be evolving, to be human in the middle of change. Acceptance is a bridge, not forcing yourself forward, not dragging yourself backward, but standing still long enough to let your system recalibrate, to let your identity loosen without collapsing, to trust that clarity forms after honesty, not before it. One day, you'll realize you crossed this bridge quietly, not with a dramatic moment, but with small internal decisions, less self-betrayal, more listening, less rushing, more grounding. And when you finally step fully into who you're becoming, it won't feel like abandoning your past. It will feel like carrying forward only what was real. This phase doesn't mean you're lost. It means you're between lives. And that space, uncomfortable as it is where real transformation happens. You feel at the moment the world quiets down, an emptiness that isn't just silence, but a pressure, a space where you can't distract yourself, where no one else is there to buffer you from your own thoughts. You notice how the phone doesn't ring, how the familiar voices fade, how even the routines that once gave comfort now echo back only your own reflection. And at first, it terrifies you. Loneliness feels like a trap, a judgment, a reminder that maybe you're not enough on your own. So you scramble, you fill the time, you scroll, you talk when you don't need to. Anything to avoid the stagnance of being with yourself. But the more you avoid it, the louder the truth becomes. The truth that you are here, and nothing external will make the noise go away. That pressure, that quiet, that stillness, it is not a punishment. It is not a sign of failure. It is a refining space. Isolation forces you to see what you've been running from. It exposes habits that were hiding your insecurities. It shows where you've been seeking validation outside yourself because you weren't willing to trust your own instincts. And that exposure hurts. It can feel like being stripped down to raw nerves, like the floor beneath you has disappeared. But that's exactly what you need. This is the stage where clarity grows. Not in loud proclamations, not in sudden insights, not in applause from the outside. Clarity grows quietly, in the hours when your mind slows, when your emotions settle, when you finally stop arguing with yourself. It grows in the space where you're forced to confront the questions you've been postponing. Who am I without masks? What do I want without pressure? What can I trust within myself? It is in solitude that you begin to rebuild your relationship with yourself. The one you may have ignored while chasing comfort, approval, or distraction. In isolation, every thought you can't hide from becomes a lesson. Every feeling you tried to numb becomes a guide. Every silence that once frightened you becomes a mirror, reflecting the truth that you've been too busy to notice. You already have what you need inside. The discomfort is part of the process. It pushes you to pay attention, to slow down, to face things that only you can face. And when you finally stop fleeing it, you start to see the power it offers. You see that being alone doesn't mean being abandoned, that the absence of noise is not absence of support, that the space around you is a container for your growth, not a void. So you stop resisting. You stop scrambling. You let yourself be here, fully, without interruption. You let your thoughts settle. You let your emotions speak. You let the quiet teach you how to trust yourself, how to hold your own hand, how to make decisions without needing someone to confirm them. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, you start to understand something profound. The isolation you feared was never empty. It was full of preparation, full of alignment, full of the self-reliance and clarity that will guide you when the world starts to return. You begin to see that solitude is not a punishment, but a forge, and everything you've been running from quietly begins to make you stronger. You've been pushing for so long that your arms ache from holding on to outcomes that never quite arrive. You force situations, people, and even yourself into shapes that feel unnatural. Every day feels like a battle with reality, like you're swimming against a current that only grows stronger. And somewhere deep down, you feel the exhaustion building, not from lack of effort, but from trying to make life bend to your will. That's when you start noticing the cracks. The moments where control fails, where effort feels heavy, where results evade you no matter how much you push. You tell yourself you need to try harder, to think smarter, to manipulate circumstances into submission. But it never works the way you imagine. And the harder you push, the more resistance you meet, not from the world, but from yourself. The truth is, forcing never creates alignment. It only creates tension, friction, and fatigue. And yet, letting go feels terrifying, because surrender isn't giving up. Surrender is stepping out of the way of your own interference, allowing life to move without your hand gripping it. It's the realization that effort and trust are not enemies. They are partners, but only when force stops dominating the equation. You start noticing it in small ways. A conversation flows naturally instead of being managed. A choice feels clear without overthinking every angle. A day unfolds without you micromanaging every moment. It's subtle at first, almost imperceptible. but it carries a weight that pushing never could: ease. Alignment has a quiet power that effort alone cannot manufacture. This is the point where internal shifts happen, where you realize that controlling less does not mean achieving less, where effort, when coupled with trust, becomes focused, deliberate, and resilient instead of frantic and chaotic. Your mind begins to relax, your body responds, and your spirit feels less like it's clawing its way forward and more like it's moving naturally toward what it was meant to reach. And in that space, you feel a strange liberation. The resistance that once felt external begins to dissolve internally. You understand that forcing was never about results. It was about fear. Fear of uncertainty. Fear of waiting. Fear of trusting that your preparation, your choices, and your integrity were enough. The moment you stop trying to control outcomes, you stop fighting yourself. You realize that growth, progress, and even miracles do not respond to brute force. They respond to alignment, to moments when your actions, intentions, and presence meet life without struggle. When you stop shaping the world and start shaping yourself to move fluidly with it. And for the first time in a long time, you feel it, the harmony between effort and trust, between action and patience, between who you are and who you're becoming. It doesn't feel like surrender in the sense of weakness. It feels like stepping into your own power, effortless and unwavering. This is where everything changes, not because you pushed harder, but because you finally let life meet you halfway. And in that alignment, you become unstoppable, not by force, but by flow. You notice it in moments so small you almost miss them. A thought that no longer triggers anxiety. A reaction that used to feel automatic but now comes with pause. A sense of calm where there used to be chaos. These are the signs, tiny, quiet, almost imperceptible, that something inside you is shifting. And because they are subtle, it's easy to overlook them, to shrug them off, to insist that change should feel monumental, dramatic, obvious. But that's the trap. Change is rarely loud at first. It whispers, it creeps, it grows beneath the surface before it touches a world you see. You start to feel impatient. You've been waiting, working, surviving, transforming, and you want to see proof. You want confirmation that all the struggle, the solitude, the internal battles were worth it. You look outward, measuring everything against outcomes, results, milestones, signs visible to the eyes of the world. But external evidence is often the last thing to arrive, and the longer you wait for it, the more restless you become. So you're challenged to turn inward, to notice the small shifts that don't yet move mountains, but move you, the moment you respond differently to old triggers, the moment your priorities start aligning with your values without effort, the moment you feel a subtle sense of steadiness in situations that once rattled you. These are not minor victories. They are proof that growth is happening quietly underneath the noise of impatience. Awareness becomes your tool. Patience becomes your practice. And in these moments, you start learning something profound, that transformation doesn't rush. It doesn't conform to schedules, deadlines, or external timelines. It unfolds in its own rhythm, and the only way to recognize it is to slow down, to pay attention, to give yourself permission to observe rather than demand, to witness rather than force. You notice that the world hasn't changed yet, but you have. Your perception has shifted. Your responses have shifted. Your energy has shifted. And that is the proof that matters most. The signs you've been waiting for aren't always outside. They're inside. They're in the way you breathe, the way you listen, the way you feel moments that used to hurt and now barely touch you. They are subtle, yes, but they are undeniable. The final lesson of growth is that presence matters more than anticipation, that what is happening within you, quietly, steadily, matters more than what you hope will appear outside, that the internal shifts, the micro-adjustments of heart and mind, are the scaffolding on which your new life will be built. So you stop chasing outcomes. You stop forcing validation. You stop measuring yourself against tomorrow before it arrives. You become present with what is happening right now, in real time, in the quiet, invisible changes. And as you do, you realize that this is exactly where transformation lives, in awareness, in patience, in the subtle yet undeniable shift of who you are becoming. The signs were there all along. You just needed to notice them. And noticing is enough.